Alright guys, welcome back to F1 News. It was never going to be a quiet winter for Formula 1's governing body, the FIA. Massive news today that the FIA sporting director, who's only been in the role less than a year, has decided to resign his position, citing apparently that it's such a shambles internally at the FIA that the changes he wants to make to improve racing operations cannot happen for various reasons. This might well send shockwaves through the FIA. This is their second big resignation in a matter of just a few days. Especially when this guy was touted by Formula 1 teams and Formula 1 themselves as being the man to potentially fix the FIA. If he believes that he can't do it, what does that mean for the future relationship between the two parties? Very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always, I'd greatly appreciate it. First of all, a couple of pieces of news here. So 5th of February 2024, that is going to be the date with two separate team announcements. Firstly, Team Stake, F1 Team, Kick, whatever it's going to be called. Sauber, basically. 5th of February we can be waiting for, and the same date actually for Williams, who also confirm it's Monday the 5th of February. So yeah, you wait an entire off-season, and then you get two announcements that come along on the very same day at the start of next season. This is what we know so far. So Williams, Sauber, whatever they're going to be called, and then Ferrari on the 13th of February. Other teams as yet to be determined. Speaking of Ferrari though, there was this going around about Carlos Sainz's contract negotiations. We know full well that Leclerc's going to get a deal soon, whenever that's going to be. Ferrari are somewhat less keen to lock in the deal with Sainz. I'm sure they kind of want to keep Sainz on, but they want to keep their options open. There might be other opportunities on the horizon in the near future, and I don't believe, despite what Vasseur says about there not being a number one driver, I would say he's more committed to Leclerc as the long-term number one, as it were, as opposed to Carlos Sainz. As Sainz actually said that he wants a deal done before the season starts. He doesn't really want to be in a situation where he's driving the final year of his contract without the upcoming years determined. So he wants to get the deal done by the time the new season starts. And he also says, though, that he only wants to sign the deal from his side if he feels valued at Ferrari. And I can understand, if you're Sainz and you see Leclerc, at least rumours, Leclerc's getting this big deal, 2027, 2029, 50 million euros a year, which is on par with, like, you know, what Verstappen and Hamilton get paid. That's a pretty big deal. And if Sainz is sitting there thinking, oh, hang on a second, like, you're giving Leclerc these contracts, I was pretty close to him this year in the championship positioning. Not saying that totally tells the story of the relative skill levels of the drivers, in my opinion, but you can understand why Sainz might not be so happy. Now, he's not going to turn down a Ferrari contract for no good reason, but he has said that, you know, he wants to ensure that he feels valued by Ferrari. And if you're Sainz, I think you can maybe understand why that might be a little bit tricky to realise, given the way things are currently progressing. But Fred Vasseur says, no hurry, we've still got 13 months on both of these contracts, so it's quite comfortable. We'll get it sorted in due course, whatever that's going to look like. Sauber as well, who have been a massively anonymous team, I would say, for the last couple of seasons. They might add a touch of green because they're getting sponsored by Kick. We know the Kick.com, all this stuff. Green, you know, branding basically. Rumour has it their livery next year is going to be very different and a unique colour scheme expected. If I had to guess, I'd say it's going to be green based on the evidence that I've just mentioned, especially if the actual chassis is going to be called the Kick Sauber, whatever it is, as it was rumoured to be after Kick.com, owned by Stake.com. You guys know how it goes. So as questionable as this sponsorship relationship might potentially be, I'm kind of down for some green on the grid. I'm not going to lie, it's been quite some time. And if it's, well, at least they would stand out a bit more than they presently do, even if their car still isn't particularly good. Now, speaking of a car that is going to be good, the Red Bull, there has been some rumours coming out of Christian Horner on this actually, that they are seeing some diminishing returns in their development. Now, I'm not sure. Okay, I think I buy this from Horner, as in they should be seeing diminishing returns, right? If they're not seeing diminishing returns, I think that's, you know, that's a scary sign for the rest of the grid. And you would expect that at some point, Red Bull will get near to their theoretical development ceiling of this concept, and therefore there isn't too much further they can go. So they think that there's some diminishing returns. Now, Horner's always going to say this stuff, right? This is always, that, you know, he always says, oh, you know, dominance isn't going to come to an end. The other teams are going to be more competitive. Our car isn't even going to be that good after all this stuff. Does that really represent the reality of the situation? I'm not so sure. And look, who knows if they're going to have the championship once again wrapped up by the midpoint of the season. But he does say that they're struggling to find more and more performance. But Adrian Newey hasn't exactly said the same thing. We'll come to this actually in a second here. But this is what Adrian Newey said about it, that he was never satisfied with last year's RB19. I've never been satisfied. We've had this fantastic season, broken barriers, records, whatever, but the reality is there's things with the car that we feel can be improved. So, Newey believes, and the other guys at Red Bull seem to believe, that there's many areas in which they can improve the RB19, which is, it's not difficult to believe because there's always very small and slight improvements you can make, but the car was good in every zone. It's like every other team had weaknesses. They had weak corners, they had weak tracks, they had, poor straight line speed, or, bad performance in qualifying or tyre warm-up or whatever. Okay, Red Bull maybe struggle with that a bit, but overall, their car was just so good in every area that it's tough to even understand what you would target for improvement with that car, because it was basically as quick, if not quicker, than any other car in every corner type on every single circuit. But, Newey obviously is a perfectionist, and he's trying to go one step further with next year's car. We've got to talk about, though, the FIA, because, man, it's been an absolute shambles over the last couple of weeks. There's been so many pieces of drama and controversy, and we have another one emerging today. So if you guys have missed the story on this, the big drama really right now between Formula 1 and the FIA is quite possibly around the leadership of Mohammed Ben Sulayem. They don't seem to like him. They want him gone. They're not happy with his actions. At least that's how I read the situation. So you guys probably know that Toto Wolff and Susie Wolff were investigated. Well, they weren't really investigated. They were placed under investigation by the FIA for the matter of about 24 to 48 hours after there were some rumours going around that there was potentially compliance issues with their two respective roles in the sport. Now, all the teams and Formula 1 then came out with statements saying that no, they'd never told the FIA to investigate this. We don't know where you guys are getting it from. And even, as I say, Formula 1 themselves were very critical of the announcement here from every single party. So all the teams said, FIA, you're a complete mess. Formula 1 said you're a complete mess. And every time this happens, or every time there's big drama between the governing body, the FIA, and the Formula 1 teams and Formula 1 themselves, there's always threatening, oh, we'll just leave you guys. We don't need the FIA anymore. We'll do it ourselves. We'll manage it ourselves. We'll govern the sport ourselves. And it might be possible, but it might be a challenge, and especially in terms of the way the commercial rights are held. It's like the FIA technically own Formula 1, but they lease out the ownership of it or whatever to the Formula 1 management group. So it's a bit complicated commercially and legally to make a split there. But every time there's drama here, they always threaten to leave. Whether that's ever actually going to be the case, there was the war about this 15 or so years ago, and they had a big discussion on it, and we're still kind of with the FIA as we are today. But things have changed over time, but they're always threatening to do something. So the FIA has made many steps lately that I would say show they are not confident themselves in their own governance of the sport. The fans know this full well. If you watched any races this season, you'll know that there are controversial decisions, questionable decisions, strange penalties that are applied in some cases and not in others, especially in the race stewarding itself. I mean, look, this Grand Prix, this is Abu Dhabi, back in 2021, was a prime example of some of the absolute shambolic decision-making that can be made from the FIA stewards. Has that really got better over the last couple of years? Sure, Michael Massey's gone. Are the stewards any better now than they were previously? And that's not the only thing about the FIA, right? There's plenty of other issues with the governance over there as well. But the race operational governance is problematic. Every single race almost, there's some drama about the stewards making a questionable decision. Sometimes that's justified, sometimes maybe it's not. But I think usually it is. Especially when, just the other day, the FIA said that if you want to, as a team, request a right of review for a decision that you think is bad, you will have to pay a fee to do that. And if we disagree, then we will say, unlike you guys, we're keeping your fee and we're going to have a nice dinner out at this, Michelin star restaurant. In addition to the fact that they've increased the maximum fine that they can give the drivers from 250,000 euros up to €1 million. For what reason, I don't know. But all of these steps, to me, seem like the FIA is trying to incentivize less criticism of itself, and that if you were confident in your decisions being correct, you wouldn't need to do any of this stuff. But this is the stuff they're doing. This might well be indicative of exactly what Steve Nielsen, sporting director, well now former sporting director at the FIA, has been feeling. As Andrew Bentonere of the BBC says, I don't think this has been officially announced yet, but if the BBC are saying it, this is basically going to be true, that he's quit after less than a year in the job. This is truly remarkable stuff. This is is the article from January this year when Steve Nielsen, formerly of Alpine or worked with, Renault, now it's Alpine, has taken a new role with the governing body, the FIA, with the aim of fixing the sport's race management problems. He left a senior F1 position to become FIA sporting director. He will oversee race control operations that have been at the centre of many controversies in recent years. So they go on to say, basically, a lot of Formula 1 people and Formula 1 teams people and even Formula 1 themselves, Nielsen's move comes with the blessing of F1, which believes he is the right man to fix issues that have been the subject of concern within the sport for quite some time. So, well, how about that? Now, this is the article that comes out today. Steve Nielsen has now resigned from his role as sporting director of the Formula 1's governing body, the FIA, less than a year since being appointed. Appointed in January, that's the article we just saw, with a mandate to improve the FIA's race control operations after a series of controversies. No reason has been given for Nielsen's departure, but sources say he was unhappy with several parts of his role. Nielsen, now 59, was unavailable for comment, but F1 insiders have told BBC Sport that Nielsen felt the FIA was not willing to make the changes he felt were required to make its race control operations fit for purpose. So, I mean, look, if the F1 insiders are right and the BBC are reporting it straight up, that's quite the statement to make, is it not? That Nielsen, the former sporting director of the FIA tasked with fixing the issues, has said that he's tried to make changes to the way things are run, and they simply either don't listen or, they're not making the changes that are making it fit for purpose. So Nielsen said, all right, I can't make any changes here. They're not listening to me, so I'm out of here, right? Like, it's not getting out of bed on my watch. So, the management is terrible, and he's gone. Now, this is where things become controversial. In addition, though, is that the teams and the drivers all backed this move. Even George Russell said back in Belgium that, Nielsen's been a great addition. He's working hard, he's trying to improve things. But Nielsen clearly thinks that he can't make any further progress, and apparently he communicated this to the FIA internally on the 21st of December. Even just, the 13th of December, Deborah Mayer resigned from her position as the head of the FIA's Commission for Women. So 2 big departures in the last 2 weeks. And yeah, what are the other teams going to think about this going forward? Just to go through a few of the questions. I could have picked probably any race this season and found a few examples of questionable race management. Now, Nielsen isn't necessarily at fault for this. He only joined a few months ago. The stewards, the way they're selected, the fact that there's a change in the head steward on a week-by-week basis, it's all interesting stuff. It's all probably suboptimal stuff. Probably the biggest one this year in terms of controversy really was what happened back in Singapore when Max Verstappen stopped at the end of the pit lane and was not given a penalty for this, although the stewards actually said afterwards that, yeah, he probably should have got a penalty for that. So, people were confused. How did Verstappen escape a penalty at Singapore after blocking the pit lane for too long, compared to what the rules say, after impeding Tsunoda and still didn't get a penalty? So Martin Brundle, many others in the paddock were like, what's going on here? Carlos Sainz said, like, what are you doing, stewards? And then afterwards they said, yeah, we were kind of too lenient with that. He definitely should have had a grid drop for that and potentially a second one for the pit lane incident. So, you got to wonder how and why did Verstappen get away with this exactly? And even in Austria, I mean, track limits were a massive point of controversy all year. The FIA can't seem to properly police them. I mean, Austria was a disaster really when they finished the Grand Prix and then it's like, well, actually, hang on a second, we have about 50 extra penalties to give out. So here you go, guys. So you don't know the results of the race until hours afterwards when they've tallied up all these penalties. And sure, they might need to add AI. They might need to find other ways to actually make it work. But they're clearly not doing enough to properly police this stuff, which it is their job to do. So, Horner's obviously been frustrated about this, and even in the US Grand Prix, when a track turn 6, at that Grand Prix, they were not detecting track limits violations. So many drivers, including Sergio Perez, went off the track there about 22 times, were not punished at all. So, as I say, you can find numerous examples. I'm sure you'll come up with many others in the comment section below. Any race, you can probably find something like this, somewhat problematic. So again, this really does put Mohammed Ben Sulayem, the FIA president's position, under question. I tried to find more controversies about this guy. I had a quick look on his Wikipedia. I can only find 2. It's kind of a shame that they haven't listed out all of the controversies that he's had this year, because you could make a section on this just for 2023 and it'd probably fill this entire page. But with these 2 big departures and with massive pressure on Ben Sulayem, it's not a good sign for the FIA, especially when the teams were really confident that Nielsen could be the man to turn the ship around at the FIA. He's now decided that it's a sinking ship, that he's just decided to get out of there before it collapses even further, under seemingly the leadership of this guy. So what's going to happen in the future? As we heard a week or so ago, this was not going to be a quiet winter for the FIA. There were going to be big talking points and everything emerging. We now have one more of those. So I wonder if there'll be big reaction to this from the teams, from Formula One themselves, because, you know, this is another indication that the FIA is arguably not fit for purpose for the governance they're presently trying to employ. But very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comments below. Few things to finish up the video with. I am getting a bit concerned here if Oliver Bearman, of course, Formula 2 driver, very promising one at the moment. He's driving for Prema next year alongside Kimi Antonelli. He's a Ferrari junior, so potentially some relationship there with Haas. So the concern is, I think, that many people want Bearman to steer very much clear of Haas. Please don't drive for them. Like, wait for another chance. Maybe you can wait for the Ferrari seat at some point. Maybe it's going to be necessary for Bearman to drive for Haas, but Haas apparently were very impressed by Bearman this year in the FP1 runs that he did, and now is saying that they're open to signing a rookie in 2025. So, you know, that makes me think that Bearman is certainly a key candidate. If, let's say, he was to win Formula 2 or something, then that would probably be quite likely. Is it actually a good move for Bearman? I don't know, but it's also kind of saying to Hülkenberg and also to Magnussen, who knows if Hülkenberg might go to Audi Sauber anyway, that, you know, we're definitely not locked in, but this is the way that Steiner tends to run the team. And just to close out the video, I thought was kind of interesting because, you know, we might have more rookie seasons. We have no rookie seasons this upcoming year, by the way, because there is, apart from Lawson maybe, who could step in at some point if Ricciardo goes to Red Bull. But, you know, just comparing some of the most impressive rookie seasons in recent memory, Piastri actually won this. I think that's probably a bit of recency bias in play. I voted for Leclerc's 2018 season. At least he beat his teammate, you know. Piastri certainly didn't do that. Piastri was very impressive. Won a sprint race, podiums, all this stuff. But I'd probably give it the way of Leclerc personally. Out of these four options, of course, you know, there's been other more impressive rookie seasons in the past. And just one more poll to mention for you guys. Most evenly matched teammate on the grid. So Norris, Piastri got some votes in this. Hamilton, Russell got the least votes, actually, probably, at least this season, the biggest gap between those two drivers. Leclerc and Sainz won this, which I was a little bit surprised about, because I think Leclerc and Sainz are pretty evenly matched overall in terms of point scoring, but I do think that Leclerc is, you know, in terms of raw skill, I do think he's quite substantially better, but Sainz is generally more consistent and maybe can deal with different car and driving styles a bit more often than Leclerc can. But I would have given it to Ocon and Gasly because I think they're both drivers that are very solid, probably both somewhat underrated, and okay, they have their flaws, but they're kind of, in some ways, they're perfect teammates at Alpine because they're very evenly matched. They're both French, but they'll also have, you know, a fair few on-track incidents, which we've seen this season as well. But very much interested in your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.